My 8-year-old son was left in foster care by my parents while they took a trip to Hawaii with my brother's children. The note read, "Sorry, sweetie, we just couldn't take care of him." I didn't yell. I just quietly filed a report. The next morning, the smell of a hospital lingered, impossible to fully wash away. It was a sharp, sterile scent that clings to your scrubs, your hair, and even the pores of your skin. Even after a long, hot shower, I could sometimes still detect it, a phantom reminder of the controlled chaos I just left behind. But tonight, that clinical scent was being overwhelmed by something far more pleasant. The warm, plastic, and cardboard smell of new Legos, along with the greasy, comforting aroma of pepperoni pizza. "Dad, you need the T-47 inverted cross strut next," Liam said, his voice a low murmur of concentration. He didn't look up from the intricate web of gray and black pieces spread across our small living room floor. At just 8 years old, my son possessed the focus of a master architect. His world was filled with precise angles and interlocking bricks. A universe where every piece had a purpose and a place. I envied him that. The T-47? Copy that, Commander. I sifted through the pile, my movements slow and heavy. A 12-hour shift in the ER felt like running a marathon through a minefield. You're on your feet, your mind racing, navigating tragedy and relief, and you come home feeling drained. Every part of you aches. But this right here was the remedy. The quiet click of the bricks, the low hum of the refrigerator, the sight of my son's dark hair falling over his brow as he constructed starships. This was my world. A photo on the mantel caught my eye. It was from 3 years ago, me, Liam, and his mother, Antonia. We were smiling, but it was the kind of smile you put on for a camera, not for each other. A month after that photo was taken, she packed her bags and explained that she wasn't cut out for this and had found someone who was. She hadn't just left me, she'd left Liam. The pain of that betrayal had long since scabbed over, leaving a scar that served as a constant reminder. I was his sole protector, his only parent. There was no backup. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, rattling against a stray Lego. The screen lit up with a picture of my mother. I sighed, wiping a smudge of pizza grease from my jeans before answering. "Samuel, darling, I was just thinking about you." Her voice was bright, a carefully polished performance I knew all too well. "Hi, Mom. Everything okay?" "Oh, everything's wonderful. Your father was just re-elected as chairman of the Northwood Community Foundation. Unanimously. We're so proud. It's so important for the family to have that kind of presence." I knew presence, position, and presentation were the holy trinity of my parents' belief system. And Victor's Amelia just won her regional soccer tournament. They're saying she's a prodigy. Of course, Victor bought her the best cleats. You have to invest in talent, you know. "That's great, Mom." I watched as Liam fitted a piece into his creation with a satisfying snap. Her tone shifted, dropping a few degrees into a familiar syrupy pity. "And how are you and little Liam holding up? It must be so hard for you doing it all alone. If only Antonia had been." Well, you know, the old wound twinged. She never missed a chance to poke at it. "We're fine, Mom. Liam's building a starship that could probably fly to Mars." "That's nice, sweetie." The dismissal was as subtle as a punch. My son's passions were nice. Victor's children's achievements were investments. I had lived with that equation my whole life. I was the reliable one, the responsible one. Victor was the exciting one, the one they poured their hopes, and more often than not, their money, into. Have you ever been the other child? The reliable one they call for favors but never for celebrations? The thought was bitter, and I swallowed it down like medicine. The next day, as if on cue, my phone rang again. It was Victor. He never called just to chat. "Sam, buddy, how's it going?" he started, his voice slick with manufactured charm. After 2 minutes of small talk, he got to the point. "Listen, man, I'm in a bit of a bind. Jason's hockey stick broke, and the good ones are like $100. I'm a little short this month. Think you could spot me?" "I can't, Vic, things are tight." I heard a sigh of frustration on his end. "Don't be like that, Sam. It's for the family. Mom and Dad are already helping out with Amelia's travel costs. I thought you'd want to pitch in." "My branch of the family is pitching in for rent and groceries," I said, my voice flatter than I intended. "Sorry, Vic, I can't." He hung up without another word. The transaction was over. The real crisis came 2 days later. It started with the wail of sirens, a sound that usually faded into the background noise of my life. But this time it was different, a multi-car pileup on the interstate. My phone lit up with a mass text from the hospital, "All hands on deck." All scheduled leave canceled. Report immediately. I felt a surge of adrenaline followed by a wave of cold panic. My regular babysitter, Mrs. Gable, was out of town for her own family emergency. I ran through my list of friends and neighbors. One was sick, another was working, another was out of town. The walls started to close in, a knot of dread forming in my stomach. I made the call I had been avoiding. My father answered. "Samuel, this is a surprise." I quickly explained the situation, my words tumbling out. "A major trauma incident. Mandatory recall. I just need someone to watch Liam for a few nights." "Well, that's inconvenient," he said, his voice laced with annoyance. "Your mother and I have several foundation events this week. It's a very busy time." I heard my mother take the phone. Her voice was the one she used for public appearances, sugary, sympathetic, and utterly fake. "Robert, don't be silly. This is our son, our grandson. Of course we'll help. Bring Liam right over, Samuel. He'll be perfectly fine with us." The relief that washed over me was so profound it almost made me dizzy. "Thank you, Mom. Thank you so much. You're saving my life." "That's what family is for, darling," she cooed. "It's all about presentation. We have to support each other." I packed Liam's bag, his favorite Lego minifigure tucked safely in the front pocket. As I hugged him goodbye at their polished front door, inhaling the scent of my mother's expensive perfume and my father's quiet disapproval, I pushed down the familiar anxiety. I ignored the little voice in my head that whispered, "This feels wrong." I trusted them. It was the last time I would ever make that mistake. The next 3 days were a blur of blood, beeping machines, and the hollow-eyed faces of frightened families. I stitched, stabilized, and consoled, running on caffeine and the pure, unthinking momentum of crisis response. I was a machine, a cog in the life-saving apparatus of the ER. When the charge nurse finally told me I could go home, the exhaustion hit me like a physical blow. All I wanted was to pick up my son, go home, and sleep for a week. I drove straight to my parents' house, my mind filled with the image of Liam's smiling face. But as I turned onto their pristine tree-lined street, a prickle of unease started in my gut. The house was dark. Every window was black and lifeless. My father's Lexus was gone from the driveway. Maybe they went out for dinner, I told myself, my heart starting to race. I walked up the stone pathway and rang the bell. The chime echoed inside the empty house. I rang it again, then banged on the heavy oak door, nothing. The unease quickly curdled into panic. I pulled out my phone and called my mother. It went straight to voicemail, her cheerful recorded voice a mockery. I called my father, straight to voicemail. My hands started to shake. This wasn't right. I called Victor. He answered on the 4th ring, his voice groggy and annoyed. "What, Vic? Where are Mom and Dad?" "I'm at their house. It's empty." "Where's Liam?" There was a pause, a hesitation that was so full of guilt it was practically screaming. "Oh, they had to go somewhere. An emergency, yeah, a family emergency." "What emergency? What are you talking about? Is Liam with you?" "No, he's fine." "I'm sure," Victor stammered. The lie was so clumsy, so transparent, it felt like a slap. He didn't know where his own nephew was. "Listen, I gotta go." He hung up. I stood on the manicured lawn, the perfect flower beds seeming to mock me. My breath came in short, sharp gasps. My chest felt like it was wrapped in barbed wire. Where was my son? Then my phone rang, an unknown number. I fumbled to answer it, my thumb slipping on the screen. "Hello, am I speaking with Mr. Samuel Carter?" A calm, professional female voice asked. "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Evelyn Davis. I'm a social worker with Child Protective Services." The world tilted on its axis. The manicured lawn, the dark house, the silent street, all of it swam in a nauseating blur. "What? Why are you calling me?" "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice softening with a practiced empathy that did nothing to quell the terror icing my veins. "We have your son, Liam, in our care. He was brought into our custody 2 days ago." The drive to the CPS office was a nightmare. I don't remember the traffic or the route. I only remember the sound of my own ragged breathing and the single repeating question in my head. The building was sterile, smelling of old paper and industrial cleaner. Ms. Davis led me to a small, windowless room. She was a woman in her 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes that held no judgment, only a weary sort of compassion. She explained the situation in a calm, steady voice that felt completely disconnected from the horror of her words. 2 days ago, my parents, Carol and Robert Carter, had brought Liam here. They had identified themselves as his temporary guardians. They had signed a statement claiming that his father, me, was indefinitely unavailable to care for him. They said I was dealing with a severe personal crisis. Then they left. They just left him, I whispered, the words feeling like shards of glass in my throat. Yes, Mr. Carter. They signed him over for emergency foster placement. It was so monstrous, so fundamentally unbelievable that my mind couldn't process it. My own parents. I felt a sudden violent urge to be sick. But then Ms. Davis said, "He's been asking for you. He's a very resilient boy." And all the rage, all the confusion evaporated, replaced by one overwhelming need. "Can I see him?" She led me to a brightly lit playroom. And there he was, my son. He was sitting at a small plastic table, his shoulders slumped. He wasn't building anything. He was just staring at a generic teddy bear someone had given him. His favorite Lego minifigure was nowhere in sight. He looked smaller, so much smaller than he had 3 days ago. He looked up as I entered, and his eyes, my son's beautiful brown eyes, were clouded with a hurt so deep it stole my breath. I knelt in front of him, and he just stared at me for a long moment before whispering words that shattered what was left of my heart. "Grandma said you weren't coming back." I pulled him into my arms, burying my face in his hair, fighting back the sob that clawed at my chest. I held it together for him. I would hold it all together. Later that night, with Liam finally asleep in his own bed, clutching my hand like a lifeline, the grief began to recede, and something else took its place. It was a cold, hard substance forming in my gut, fury. A fury so pure and potent it clarified everything. I needed to understand why, not just why they'd left him, but why they'd lied. I sat in the dark, the only light coming from my laptop screen. My hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped. I opened my browser, my fingers tapping the keys with mechanical precision. I went to Facebook. I went to Victor's wife's page. And there it was. A public post uploaded yesterday, a photograph. My parents, Carol and Robert. My brother Victor and his wife. Their 2 children, all of them standing on a pristine beach, the water a shocking crystalline blue behind them. They were all wearing leis. They were all beaming, a portrait of perfect family bliss. They were in Hawaii. The caption, written by my sister-in-law, read, "Surprise family vacation in paradise. So blessed to get away from it all. #family first #Hawaii." That was the moment, the point of no return. The sight of their smiling faces, the lie of #family first floating under the image of my parents, who had just hours before abandoned their 8-year-old grandson to the state. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a mistake. It was a choice, a deliberate act of cruelty traded for a week in the sun. The bile rose in my throat, hot and acidic. But I didn't shout. I didn't smash the laptop. The ER had taught me one thing. In a crisis, you don't panic. You get cold. You get methodical. My grief had been a fire, but this new rage was ice. I was no longer a son searching for an explanation. I was a father preparing for war. I closed the laptop. In the quiet darkness of my apartment, I picked up my phone. I made 2 calls. The first was to my best friend, Dave Martinez, a man who happened to be a very good family law attorney. The second was to the non-emergency line of the city police department to file a formal report. "Let me get this straight," Detective Miller said, leaning back in his squeaky office chair. He was a thick-set man with a gravelly voice and eyes that had seen too much. He scribbled on a notepad, his pen moving with an angry energy. "Your parents, Robert and Carol Carter, told you they would watch your son. Instead, they drive him to a CPS facility, falsely report you as an unfit parent, and then board a flight to Hawaii with your brother and his family." "That's correct," I said, my voice steady. I laid it all out for him. The timeline, the texts, Victor's evasive phone call. The final piece of evidence was a printout of the Facebook photo, which now sat in the middle of his cluttered desk. Miller stared at the picture, his lip curling in disgust. "family first," he read aloud, then snorted. "The nerve." He looked up at me. "Mr. Carter, what they did isn't just immoral. Child abandonment, filing a false report to a state agency, these are felonies. I've coordinated with the authorities in Maui. They'll be paying your parents a visit in the morning." I imagined it with grim satisfaction. Not the frantic Hollywood-style raid, but something more humiliating. A loud, official knock on the door of their luxurious ocean view room. My father, hungover and indignant in a hotel robe. My mother, her face a mask of confusion, her hair in disarray. The quiet, firm voices of uniformed officers asking them to step into the hallway in full view of other guests. the public unraveling of their perfect presentation. It was a start. The first call came the next morning, just as I was making Liam pancakes. My phone screen lit up with my mother's name. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message on speaker. Her voice was no longer polished. It was a high-pitched, hysterical shriek. "Samuel, what have you done? What did you do? There were policemen here at our hotel. You are ruining this family. You are ruining everything." A moment later, a call from my father. I answered this one. "You have 5 seconds to explain this," he boomed, his voice shaking with rage. "I will have your job for this, Samuel. I will sue you for everything you have. We have lawyers." I let him finish, listening to the empty threats. When he finally paused to take a breath, I spoke, my voice as cold and sterile as the steel instruments in my ear. "You left my 8-year-old son in a state facility and flew to Hawaii. You lied to government officials. This is no longer a family matter. This is a criminal one. Any further communication will be through my lawyer." I hung up. The silence in my kitchen was broken only by the sizzle of pancake batter on the griddle. Liam looked up at me, his eyes wide. I forced a smile. "Everything's okay, buddy. Just some grown-up stuff." But the grown-up stuff was just getting started. A few days later, after my parents had been forced to cut their vacation short and fly home, I received a call from Ms. Davis at CPS. She had a follow-up. "I was able to get the full intake report declassified for you, given the circumstances," she said, her voice gentle. "I wanted you to be prepared." She emailed me the document. As I read it, a new level of cold dread washed over me. It was worse than I had imagined. This was the first true twist of the knife. My parents hadn't just said I was unavailable. They had constructed a careful, malicious narrative. They had told the intake worker they were deeply concerned about my erratic behavior since my divorce. They used phrases like emotional instability and hinted at a struggle with prescription painkillers to cope with the stress of being a single father. They weren't just abandoning Liam. They were methodically assassinating my character, building a case to paint themselves as saviors and me as a villain. It was a lie designed not just to cover their tracks, but to destroy my credibility and potentially my custody of my own son. How do you fight a lie whispered by your own blood? A lie designed not just to hurt you, but to take away the one thing you live for. The lie had already started to poison the well. I got an email from my department head at the hospital. It was phrased carefully, full of HR-approved language, but the message was clear. She expressed concern after receiving an anonymous call about my personal stability. My meticulously built professional reputation was under attack. I replied calmly, stating I was the victim of a serious family matter that was now in the hands of the authorities, and that I would be happy to discuss it further with HR and legal present. The next visitor at my door was Victor. He looked terrible, his face pale and unshaven. He didn't have the entitled swagger anymore. He looked like a scared kid. "Sam, you have to stop this," he pleaded, standing on my doormat. "You're tearing the family apart. They made a mistake. They were stressed. Dad's reputation, the foundation, it's all at risk." I looked at my little brother, the golden child, and felt nothing but a vast empty pity. "A mistake, Victor?" I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "They told Child Protective Services that I was a drug addict. Was that part of the mistake, or were you in on that part too?" He flinched as if I'd physically struck him. He opened his mouth, then closed it. His inability to answer was the only confession I needed. He had known. He had stood by and let it happen. Just as the walls felt like they were closing in, a small ray of light appeared. A call from my cousin Sarah, my mother's niece. We hadn't spoken in years. "Sam, I heard what happened," she said, her voice filled with a fury that mirrored my own. "I'm not surprised. I'm just so sorry it was you and Liam this time. They did something similar to my mom over Grandpa's 20 years ago. This is who they are." Her words were validation, a confirmation that I wasn't crazy. I wasn't alone. That night, I sat down with Dave, my lawyer. He listened to the entire story, his expression growing grimmer with each detail. "They've left a trail of legal landmines for themselves," he said finally. "But they'll fight dirty. Your father's position gives him influence. They'll try to paint you as unstable. So what do I do?" I asked. Dave leaned forward, a sharp glint in his eye. "You misunderstand, Sam. The fact that you're a respected ER nurse and he's the chairman of a major community charity isn't their shield. It's your sword. This isn't about money. It's about reputation. A scandal involving the chairman of the Northwood Foundation abandoning his own grandson, while that child's father is literally saving lives at the local hospital? That's not just a legal problem for him. That's a public relations apocalypse. Your integrity, Sam. That's your leverage. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of something other than rage or grief. It was power, the power that came not from anger but from the simple, solid truth of who I was. And I knew exactly how I was going to use it. The final meeting was not held in a home. There was no pretense of family left, no comfort to be offered. We met in the sterile, impersonal conference room of Dave's law office. The air was thick with a silence that felt heavier than any shouting match. My parents sat on one side of the polished mahogany table, their lawyer, a man with a permanently sour expression between them. My father, Robert, was a ghost of his usual self. His tailored suit seemed to hang off his frame, and the confident bluster was gone, replaced by a sullen, simmering anger. My mother, Carol, clutched a handkerchief, her eyes red-rimmed, though I suspected her tears were for the ruin of her social calendar, not the trauma of her grandson. Victor sat slightly apart from them, his gaze fixed on the table, a portrait of shame. I sat opposite them with Dave by my side. I felt a strange calm. The storm inside me had passed, leaving a quiet, resolute stillness. My father's lawyer spoke first, his voice a droning monotone outlining a ludicrous proposal where I would issue a public statement about a family misunderstanding in exchange for them graciously agreeing not to press charges for defamation. I let him finish. Then I looked directly at my father. "There will be no statement of misunderstanding," I said, my voice clear and steady. "Here is what is going to happen. You will both plead guilty to the charges of filing a false report and child endangerment. You will issue a formal written apology to me and another to be read to Liam in the presence of his therapist. You will establish a college trust fund for Liam in an amount equal to the full cost of your Hawaiian vacation plus your legal fees, and you will have no unsupervised contact with him indefinitely." Robert actually laughed, a short, ugly bark. "You're delusional. You think you have any right, any power to make demands of us?" This was the moment. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't present an argument. I simply gave Dave a slight nod. He slid a single folded document across the table. It was the second twist of the knife, the financial cudgel I had held in reserve. My father picked it up, his brow furrowed as he read. My mother leaned over to look, her hand flying to her mouth. It was a copy of a decade-old lien agreement. It was proof that the very house they lived in, the bedrock of their precious social standing, had been saved from foreclosure by a substantial inheritance I had received from my other grandmother. An inheritance I used to quietly bail them out when their own reckless spending had pushed them to the brink. Dave spoke into the ringing silence. "As you can see," he said calmly, "my client holds the security on your primary residence. So to be clear, you are facing criminal charges, certain public humiliation that will result in your removal from the foundation. And should my client choose foreclosure, you won't just lose your reputation, you will lose everything." The fight drained out of my father's face, leaving behind the gray, papery visage of a defeated old man. My mother began to sob, not loudly but with the quiet, helpless gasps of someone who sees their entire world crumbling. Then something unexpected happened. Victor, who had been silent the entire time, pushed his chair back and stood up. His voice was raw, cracking with a shame so profound it was painful to witness. "The trust fund for Liam," he said, looking at me, truly looking at me for the first time. "I'll pay my share. I'm selling my car and my watch. It's a start." It was the first truly autonomous, responsible decision I had ever seen him make. I looked at my brother, not with forgiveness but with a flicker of something else, acknowledgement. "Start there, Victor," I said softly. Months later, the world had found its new axis. My father had quietly resigned from the foundation, citing personal health reasons. The legal proceedings concluded with probation and court-mandated family counseling for them, which they attended with sullen compliance. The trust fund for Liam was established. The relationships were shattered, the pieces swept away. But my life was not shattered. It was being rebuilt, stronger than before. The final scene of our drama played out not in a lawyer's office, but in the sun-drenched office of Liam's child therapist. We sat on small chairs and Liam, my brave, resilient son, handed me a Lego creation he'd made. It wasn't a spaceship or a fortress. It was a simple house with two minifigures standing out front. One for him, one for me. He was no longer building walls. He was building a home again. Today, we were at the park. Liam was laughing, chasing a soccer ball with Dave's kids, my chosen family. Dave, his wife, and my cousin Sarah were spread out on a blanket nearby, sharing stories and food. The air was warm, filled with the sounds of happy children and easy friendship. I watched my son, my healthy, healing son, and felt a sense of peace that was more satisfying than any victory, more profound than any revenge. I had faced the very people who were supposed to build me up and refused to let them tear me down. I had protected my child. I had found my own worth, not in their approval but in my own actions. They say blood is thicker than water, but I've learned that water is what you need to grow. Blood can sometimes be the poison. I chose to grow. What would you have done in such a situation?